Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is Cyan of At Perceived Grace, both on here and Instagram. Today I'm going to be going over the 7 books I read in May and flipping through my reading journal with you. My reading journal is from Archer and Olive. It is a B5 size. Let's get started. When we open my reading journal to the month of May, first we see my cover page on the left-hand side. Then we see my daily pages log spread on the right-hand side. This reading journal is only for the fiction that I read, so I am only tracking my fiction reads in this journal, and I read 2,202 pages. Here is my TBR spread. I read 7 out of the 12 books on my TBR. There were really so many awesome books on this TBR spread that I really wish I'd gotten to all of them, but they are all still on my radar, and hopefully I can get to them later in the year. But moving on to my reading tracker spread. My reading tracker spread is where I simply track the started and finished dates of every book I read. So I read 7 books and I soft DNF'd. DNF means did not finish. I soft DNF'd 1 book. So it would have been 8 if I had continued reading it, but I decided to put it down for now because it just wasn't the right time for me to be reading it. But I like this spread because this is where I get a good look as far as like when I started and finished each books, and here I'm also just showing you a little bit of the deco for the overall setup. Getting into the actual books I read in the month of May, starting off with Highcliffe House by Megan Walker. This was my most highly anticipated 2024 release, and the author delivered. I am in love with Megan Walker's books. All of her books have a 5-star from me, and from the very first page of this, I was on board with the dynamic and the progression between our FMC and our MMC, Anna and Graham. This is truly a love story where the romance takes center focus. You get so much tension in this one, and it's also a great summer regency. I would say the main tropes are animosity to more, forced proximity. It's like a seaside beach setting. You get a lot of bickering and banter, tension and angst, and it's also dual POV first person, which is very, very exciting. I think family played such a beautiful role in this book. I really appreciated and related to Graham's backstory, and that was a very strong part of this book for me overall. Every side character had purpose and intention. Anna's interaction with Graham's family was the most precious thing ever, and Graham's interactions with Anna's father were so heartwarming. All of this with the backdrop of seaside Brighton in England was just such a great story. I have no complaints about this book. I highly recommend it, and I also cried at the end, and it's just a complete 5 stars from me. The romance content was clean, the language content was clean, and the violence content was clean, and it is a standalone, so read it on its own. It released on May 7th, and I just highly recommend you pick it up this summer. I think it's just a perfect Regency romance, again, especially for the summer, and overall, like I've been saying, I just recommend Megan Walker as an author. And then I read A Sham Betrothal by Jenny Goutet. Jenny is an author I'm extremely familiar with. I've read many of her stories, and her storytelling just never fails me. It was such a pleasure to experience her talent in this romantic and playful novella. This is the 4th and last book in the Georgians in Paris novella set that can be read in any order, all sweet and clean. The time period and setting really came to life in this story. This was a vibrant, short and sweet romance. The pacing was flawless. The main couple had so much chemistry. Both of their personalities made for a fun match. I enjoyed the moments with their friends, and I was even intrigued by them as side characters. I really liked the humor, and there was like a decent amount of distraction that made the story feel fuller than what it was, or just longer than what it was. I loved the premise and the execution of the story, and like I said, there was a bit of depth without it being like sad or without bogging the story down. It was still light and fun. The main tropes, I would say, are the betrothal of convenience, fake courting, meet cute, reluctant to fall, instant attraction. There's a Parisian setting, French nobility, unwanted suitors, and even a friend group. And like I said earlier, the romance content is clean. There are a couple minor instances that are infrequent in French of language, like minor, very minor in French, and then the violence is clean as well. I recommend this because it also had summer vibes. Next up is Walking on Hidden Wings by Rachel Scott McDaniel. I have to say this was extremely close to being a 5 stars for me, and I would even feel comfortable rounding it up. The biggest reason it was not 5 stars for me is I actually would categorize the romance content in the story as closed door as opposed to clean, but the closed door aspect is revolving around a married couple. That's one of the reasons I was okay continuing to read it. I usually don't like closed door because to me there is an implication there as opposed to clean. In my opinion, there should be or is no implication there. But anyway, it would be very easy to get into spoiler territory if I share too much about this story, but the romance was centered around a young, newly married couple and had a ton of depth, a lot of depth. The entire story has a vintage coziness to it, and I would give one content warning for this, but it's a spoiler, so definitely ask me about it if you want to know what it was. But it's a standalone, it's Christian historical romance mystery. The mystery was seriously so good. I was gripped by it. There's like a part 1 and a part 2 to the story, and I could not put the book down in part 2, and the pacing was just fantastic when it came to the mystery. I thought it wrapped up very nicely. The ending was lovely. Overall, a very satisfying and well-crafted novel. In this book, we have arranged marriage, mysterious deaths, a 1920s New York setting, aviation, plot twist, trust issues, high society, and hidden identities. I definitely recommend this. So just going over the content level one more time, the romance was technically closed door, involving a married couple. The language was clean, and the violence was non-graphic and brief, I would say. And then the faith content, so it is Christian historical romance mystery. The faith content was on the lighter side, and overall, like I've been saying, the mystery was just fantastic. So read it alone for that. I definitely recommend that, and I'll be reading more from this author because I was very impressed by her. Next up is a book I am very excited to talk about. This is Secondary Target by Angela Carlisle. This is a new favorite book of mine. This was so good. I read 75% of this in one sitting. I could not put it down. It is a Christian contemporary romantic suspense. It was truly suspenseful throughout the entire story. The author knew what she was doing. The pacing was strategically thrilling. Yes, the suspense was suspenseful enough to qualify as thrilling. This is not my go-to genre, and it just set the bar so high for anything else I read in this genre moving forward. I definitely recommend going into this book knowing nothing beyond what I've told you and nothing beyond what's on the back of the book. If you do need any spoilers for the violence, let me know, but in my opinion, nothing crossed a line, and it was just done so well. The romance is subtle and sweet. The faith made some really helpful points, especially in the context like this, where it's very serious. And overall, I was very invested and on the edge of my seat the entire time. It was like an easy 5 stars by the end, and I cannot stress enough how impressive this book is because it's the author's debut, and it's also the start of a series. So I just can't wait for what she has going on next with this whole series. In this book, we have second chance romance, protective ex, small business owner FMC, childhood friends, unsolved murders, someone is watching, strange happenings, and decade-old secrets. The romance content is clean, the language content is clean, the violence is frequent but non-graphic, and the faith is light. I highly recommend, and in the fall, this takes place in the fall, so definitely if you don't read it soon, read it in the fall. 10 out of 10 recommend. I guess 5 stars out of 5 stars recommend. Another 5 stars would be The Affectionate Adversary by Catherine Palmer. This is book 1 in the Miss Pickworth series, which is like a series of interconnected Christian Regency romances. This series was actually published back in 2006, and Tyndale recently reissued these beautiful covers, or just you're seeing one cover, but I have the other 2 books and the covers are beautiful. But this is a Christian Regency romance. The main tropes in this book are he falls first, off limits, will they or won't they, groveling, full circle, quoting scripture, high angst, it's complicated, and meddling family. I really loved the writing of this book. It did have a Jane Austen-esque quality to it, in my opinion. It also had Jane Austen references, which we love that. Even when plot developments frustrated me, I still enjoyed the prose. It was redundant at times, I have to say, and felt longer than a 313-page book, but obviously I didn't let that stand in the way of my rating, and I still really enjoyed it. I have to say, this is truly a Christian Regency romance. The faith content is very, there's a lot of it in this book. It's at the center of the book. Scripture and wanting to do God's will are literally at the center of this book. It revolves around the parable of the rich young ruler, primarily in Mark 10, and the biblical application of that teaching. I thoroughly enjoyed the debates between the main couple and the side characters about that point. There's also some honest commentary about society at this time, which I found really refreshing to read and agreed with in general. I enjoyed both Charles and Sarah's characters. The humor was subtle. You do get both the FMC and the MMC perspectives in a third-person limited POV. I loved the ending as well. I cried. I loved the ending so much. I genuinely think if you love Regency romance and Christian fiction, this is like perfect. I have to say that I also read the second book in this little series out of order. So I read the second book this time last year before reading the first book. I liked that one as well for the Christian content. The romance lacked a little bit for me, and I definitely recommend reading this one first, and I just liked it overall and more as well. Lastly, I'll be very brief about the 2 books that did not inspire me enough to create full page spreads for, which is going to start with The Girl from the Hidden Forest by Hannah Linder. I rated this 3 stars. Basically, my biggest issue with this book was that it was just far darker than I thought it was going to be. It's a gothic Regency romantic mystery or a Regency romantic suspense. It has amnesia, high stakes, hidden identities, secrets, the search for truth. It's also fast-paced and it's enemies to more. It was just too dark for me. I would honestly call it scary as well. I don't think it was marketed transparently. It was marketed as very whimsical and light, but I found it to be very dark and scary. I would not recommend it, and I think it should come with a lot of content warnings, so let me know if you do need those, but I won't be going over those in this video. And overall, I didn't really love the main characters either, so that was an issue too. If you want more of my thoughts on it, I did save my quick review on this book to my mini reviews 2.0 story highlights on Instagram. And then we have The Fake Out Flex by Ash Kelly. This is a contemporary sports romance, a hockey romance. It also has the brother's best friend trope, dual POV, the fake dating trope, it's always been you, small town life versus the spotlight. I read this on my Kindle, and the content for romance is clean. The language has a few minor instances that did not bother me at all, and the violence was clean. This was not a bad rating. I thought this was very cute. I would overall say it's a very solid, clean sports romance recommendation. I liked both Evelyn and Fraser's personalities. I thought they were fun and relatable to read. I really liked being in their POVs. None of the tropes were overbearing, which I greatly appreciated. I think the main couple had great communication and banter. I think there was a good mix of both going back and forth. It was playful yet mature at the same time. Overall, it was a little too long in my opinion, and I did not love the epilogue. I think I will be picking up the second book when it comes out though. While we're flipping through May in my reading journal one more time, I want to remind you that this journal is for the fiction that I read. I do not track my nonfiction in the same way. My content preferences for reading fiction are clean for romance, language, and violence, non-magical for fantasy, and I do enjoy Christian content in books. And last but not least, the images that you see in the spreads, I get them from Etsy, I get them from Canva Pro sometimes, and I also sometimes get them from Bing AI Generator, and each of these spreads does have an individual post on my Instagram except for the very last 2. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this reading wrap up and have a great reading month in June.
I know you told your friend you're not okay, and tell me what's wrong and why you never said you felt that way. And guess you're trying to stay strong and fake a smile until I look away, but I've known you too long.